They thought it was enough to disappear for a while. That silence could control the situation. That distance would increase the attachment. They believed you would be waiting, stuck in the same place, revisiting conversations, trying to understand what went wrong. They thought they had you even after they left, but they didn't see what no one else did. They didn't realize what only you felt. The weight on your shoulders when you woke up, the shortness of breath on ordinary days, the urge to disappear so you wouldn't have to explain, the tremendous effort it took not to send a message. They didn't see the quiet despair, the struggle to maintain your routine, the nights you curled up inside it and didn't ask for help. They thought it was just a phase, that you would give in soon, that all it would take was a story, a song with a not-so-subtle hint, a strategic silence. But time passed, and instead of anxiety, clarity came. Instead of neediness, strength. Instead of waiting, you. Because there came a moment when you could no longer deceive yourself. And in that moment, a realization was born that changed everything. You realized you were carrying something that wasn't even yours. You understood that the absence hurt less than the insistence. You discovered that stopping the waiting was the only way to start living again, and without warning you began to step out of the scene. Slowly, without announcement, without hints. You simply stopped seeking, stopped measuring who cared more, stopped responding to what was already clear. Those who wanted to stay did. Those who disappear teach, and those who return late find nothing left. They thought they still affected you. They thought they still hurt you, but one day they saw you, you light, you without an open wound. And in that instant they realized they lost what they never knew how to care for. Have you ever gone through this? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this text resonated with you, comment, "I needed to hear this." This person thought you would come back until they saw you happy without them. They thought so because they never stopped to realize what you truly felt. They imagined you would continue orbiting, there quietly, always nearby, even without a response, even being ignored. You thought your pain was a leash, that your commitment was submission, that your patience was a lack of options. But you understood nothing, because you weren't born to beg. You just wanted to be seen. You only wanted reciprocity. You wanted something simple, to be without having to ask for them not to leave. And even that you didn't have. When silence began to grow, you tried. You tried to keep the conversation going. You tried to interpret signs. You tried to adapt to what wasn't yours. You even tried to erase yourself. And inside, the knot kept growing. The anguish of feeling too much, the shame of seeming fragile, the sensation of being disposable. You never said it. But you thought, why me? Why now? What more could I have done? And there was no answer. Because those who disappear rarely explain. They vanish as if you were just a detail. As if all of it, what you lived through, what was built, was just any old chapter. But it wasn't. It was your life. You weren't playing around. It wasn't superficial, it wasn't light. You gave yourself fully. And when someone leaves while you are whole, there's nothing left. Just the emptiness. Just the room with echoes. The silent phone. The routine without meaning. And what no one understands is that it's not the absence of the person that hurts. It's what you become when they leave. You become a shadow of yourself. You become an absence in the mirror. You become silence within a noisy body. And even so, you stayed. You stayed because you still had hope. Even hurt. Even ignored. Even after so many no's, you stayed. And she thought that would keep you. She thought that bound you. She thought disappearing was a form of control, but she was mistaken, because time came. And time shatters you before healing. It shows you what you didn't want to see. It forces you to stop sabotaging yourself. And in that time, something in you realized you were waiting for someone who wouldn't come back. Realized the silence wasn't a pause, it was a message. Realized staying there was ceasing to exist, and you chose. For the first time in a long time. It chose you. It wasn't an act of strength, it was about survival. And little by little, without rush, without forcing smiles, without showing off, you started to come back. But not for her. For yourself. You began to sleep better. To go out without guilt. To laugh again, even if timidly. To breathe without that knot in your chest. You learned to live without apologizing for feeling, without needing to justify being intense, without diminishing yourself to fit into someone's world who never made an effort to understand you. And then came the moment she didn't foresee. The moment you showed up, happy, calm, with nothing to prove, without posting passive-aggressive messages, without provoking, without begging for attention, just living. Simple as that. And when she saw you this way, something inside her broke, because it wasn't supposed to be this way. In her mind, you would be destroyed, waiting, crawling, trapped. But no, you rebuilt yourself. And it wasn't to show resilience. It was because you realized that your story couldn't end with someone who gave up on living as a couple. And now she feels. She feels your absence. She feels your indifference. She feels the lack of who you were when she didn't even realize it. But it's over, because you don't fit in that time anymore, in that frequency, in that small space where only one person felt. Now it's you, whole, with your pain, with your light, with the silence that became your shield, and with the voice that returned to reside within you. Have you noticed that you no longer need to explain yourself? That your worth doesn't depend on validation? That love isn't about convincing someone to stay? That reciprocity isn't begged for? It's lived. If this resonated with you, right, I needed to hear this. Because there are still people thinking that disappearing is the same as having control, that ignoring is a strategy, that hurting is normal, that coming back later is always possible. It's not. You became the period, not because you wanted to end things, but because you realized that continuing would mean ceasing to exist. And the only real choice someone can make after so much pain, it's about coming back to yourself, not to prove anything, not for revenge, not to show anything, but because you can't keep putting yourself last. Did you feel that? Tell me in the comments, does this make sense to you up to this point? Right? Yes, down below. So take a deep breath, because what comes next is no longer about the other person. It's about you, about everything you stopped being while trying to earn someone's presence, about the moments you stayed silent to keep something alive, about how many times you accepted crumbs and calling it love. Do you remember? Do you remember when you tried to justify what was hurting? When you told yourself it was just a phase, that it would soon pass? When you blamed yourself for the other person's absence, as if you were not enough, too wrong, too much? You faded away, trying to illuminate a place that was only filled with shadows, and maybe the worst part wasn't even the other person's absence. It was yours, your absence from yourself, your silent resignation, your absurd attempt to keep being whole, in pieces. But one day, without a set date, the realization hit, and you saw, without needing proof, without needing confirmation. You simply understood. You realized it wasn't love, it was survival. You realized it wasn't loss, it was addiction. You realized you were begging for someone who never had the courage to choose you with the same intensity. And that's when the pain changed places. It stopped being a dagger and became a drive. It stopped paralyzing you and began to move you. You looked at yourself in the mirror again, not like before, but like someone coming back from war, full of scars, but alive. And deep down, with something that didn't exist before, self-awareness. You started to recognize yourself in every choice. You began to notice yourself in how you said no. You started to see yourself in the relief of no longer depending on others' answers. You began to perceive yourself in the silence that no longer hurt, and life started to make space for your breath, for your presence, for your own company. It happened slowly, but it was real. You began to go out and not wait for a message. You started sleeping without checking social media. You began living without asking where the other person was. You came back, and it was at that moment that everything flipped. Because those who thought they had you wrapped around their finger realized they lost you. They didn't lose you completely. They lost your purest part, the part that waited, the part that insisted, the part that forgave without even understanding what it was forgiving. That part no longer exists. Now there's presence, now there are boundaries. Now there's a you that recognizes the difference between being intense and being held hostage. And that changes everything. Because from here on out, no one can wear you out. No one can trap you in silence. No one can move you with their absence. You learned the language of time, and time taught you the value of what is mutual, of what is light, of what is simple, of what is true. And those who thought they could come and go as they pleased will have to deal with a new you. Have you noticed that? Have you experienced that moment when you realize your silence isn't waiting, it's protection? If so, comment, I lived this. Because what you went through wasn't weakness, it was a journey. And not everyone comes back from a journey like that with a whole heart, but you came back. in a different way, with a different perspective, with a different standard. And that's scary. It scares those who lost you. It scares those who underestimated you. It scares those who treated you like a backup plan. Now you are only plan A for yourself. Not because you became cold, not because you shut down, but because you realized that real love begins when you stop negotiating your dignity. Have you ever had to relearn how to love yourself after being ignored? Tell me about it in the comments. And if you made it this far, leave a heart. That's how I'll know you didn't go through this alone. Do you know why so many people only realize your value when you're already gone? Because while you were there, available, present, whole, it was too easy for them to put you off. Too easy to underestimate your commitment. Too easy to think you could endure everything. Because you always endured. You overlooked disappearances. You understood what was indefensible. You adapted to little, calling it love. And that confused people. Those who thought your kindness was weakness. Those who mistook your patience for submission. Those who never realized the magnitude of your presence until it was gone. You were always more than you appeared. You weren't needy, you were profound, you weren't dramatic, you were sensitive. You weren't too intense, you were real. But for those who live on the surface, depth is frightening, and presence unsettles those who can only deal with absence. That's why you were discarded, not for lack of value, but for excess of truth. And now that you no longer respond with urgency, now that you don't seek, now that you don't explain yourself, now that you live, that person is starting to feel, but it's too late. Because you've already realized that those who need to lose to appreciate never deserved to be in your life. You're not a bargaining chip, you're not a contingency plan. You're not a place to return for those who only know how to leave. You are a period where they swore there would be a comma, and it hurts for those who lost you. It hurts to see you light. It hurts to see you laughing genuinely. It hurts to realize that the world moved on and you didn't stay still, you didn't stay. And the greatest irony is this. Those who made you feel disposable now want to be noticed. Those who thought they would have you forever now beg for a sign. But you no longer respond, not out of malice, but for the sake of your sanity. Because loving someone should never cost you your self-love. It should never teach you to normalize disappearances, rejections, and crumbs. It should never make you fight alone. Have you realized this? That fighting alone is the most disguised form of abandonment? That trying to maintain a connection without a response is bleeding in silence? If that resonates with you, write down below, I've already given too much. Because there comes a time when exhaustion wins, and in that moment those who remain are only those who understand what it costs to keep going. What it costs to hold your own pain without blaming anyone. What it costs to learn to love without losing yourself. And you learned. You paid the price. You tore your soul. You went to the depths, but you came back. And now those who lost you will have to deal with something worse than your absence, your freedom, because you are no longer available. Not for those who want little. Not for those who only show up when they miss you. Not for those who never knew how to find you when you were still there. Do you understand now? You haven't become a bitter person. You've become selective. You've become someone who knows that being present too much where there's no return is self-harm, and never again. Never again will you beg for love. Never again will you explain what is obvious. Never again will you plead for crumbs of attention, because now you understand, and what is understood is never forgotten. If this text tore you up inside, comment, I felt every word. Those who thought you would come back never saw who you were. They saw what they needed. They saw comfort. They saw the certainty of someone who never gave up. But they didn't realize how much that cost, how much you diminished yourself inside to fit into someone else's absence, how much you held back tears just to seem strong, how painful it was to smile in the midst of abandonment. Those who thought you would return didn't see the empty nights, didn't see the deleted messages, didn't see the dark thoughts, didn't see the loneliness even with your phone in hand, but you saw, and that's when everything began to change. You saw that insisting was no longer love. It was an addiction. It was fear. It was a wound trying to appear as faith. And when that became clear, it was no longer possible to continue. You didn't shout. You didn't make a scene. You just went silent. But a different silence. A silence that doesn't wait. A silence that understands. It understands that no one comes back different if they never understood why they left. It understands that not every return is healing. Some are just repetitions. It understands that value only exists where there is reciprocity. You didn't turn the page, you changed the book. And now those who thought you would come back are watching from a distance. They're witnessing your rebuilding without knowing how you got here. Because in their minds you were still the same, but you're not. Today you choose what nourishes your peace. You walk alone, not by choice but by necessity. And you no longer need proof of love. You need real presence. You need commitment. You need honesty. And that's what's scary, because now to be by your side, someone has to be whole. They have to be real. They have to have courage. Those who thought you would come back have lost. Not out of malice, but because you have finally chosen yourself. And if this text resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear this right now. Don't keep it to yourself. There are people who need to realize they're not alone in this. Subscribe to the channel here. This is just the beginning of a conversation that will go even deeper. Rawer. More you. Leave a like. That's how I'll know this struck a chord with you. That it wasn't just reading, it was a connection. And tell me down below, have you ever experienced this? Have you had to distance yourself from someone you thought would be eternal? Comment here. We'll meet in the words, and next time, I'll be waiting for you to go even further.